How much does the royal family cost the British taxpayer? Well, as spending cuts ravage Britain's welfare system, do we still need this lavish leftover from the days of feudalism? Hello and welcome to A Simple Question with me, Phil Rees. In today's show, should the British taxpayer be doling out millions of pounds a year for Britain's royal family to be spending as they choose? Do they deserve it? Or should they be cutting back on their winter skiing holidays? Or perhaps on the 800 servants in this building behind me, Buckingham Palace? Well, before we find out what the public thinks on the streets of London, here's a short video clip.
According to official figures, taxpayers' funding to the royal household last year was £32 million, but an investigation by the campaign group Republic discovered substantial hidden costs of maintaining a royal family. The true cost of the monarchy to the taxpayer is said to be more than 6 times the official sum at £202 million. The expenditure that's not revealed to the public includes the high cost of security, travel and receptions by local councils for members of the royal family. Buckingham Palace says the Queen spends over £10 million a year on servants and entertaining 50,000 guests, mostly feeding them afternoon tea in the palace gardens. Taxpayers also pay the Queen £16 million for the upkeep of her palaces and another £4 million towards travel expenses. But the royals are already super rich from inherited private wealth. According to Forbes magazine, the Queen's personal wealth is over £300 million. It was announced in 2010 that the royal household would face a freeze on its funding in the next few years. In addition, the Sovereign Grants Act is aimed at reforming the funding system, whereby Parliament will have greater scrutiny over grant expenditure. However, the monarchy will be exempt from the Freedom of Information Act, and the public will continue to be denied accurate information about how their tax money is being spent. The wedding of Prince William and Kate Middleton was mostly paid for by the royal family, including £50,000 for the cake and £280,000 for Kate's dress. The royals also spent £500,000 on flowers. Renting Westminster Abbey was given free, but the bill for security, around £40 million, was paid by the taxpayer. The Confederation of British Industry calculates that the extra bank holiday costs the economy £6 billion in lost productivity. The other hidden cost of the royal family is their effect on British society. They promote a value system that discourages social mobility and equal opportunity. Instead, the royal family provides a signal that Britain's elite has the right to maintain privileges gained at birth. By encouraging a culture of deference, they shore up a class-based society and sanction the ownership of vast wealth by a very few.
A Simple Question is a show that finds out what the public thinks here on the streets of London. I began today by asking people whether they knew where the royal family gets its money from, and also how much the monarchy costs British taxpayers.
I always thought it was paid by the taxpayer.
Pretty much absolutely nothing. I know that they get a certain amount from the government, and I know that the Queen funds certain palaces, I think, out of her own pocket. I think I probably know as much of the 4 royal palaces. I think 2 are funded by the government and 2, I think, might be funded by her own personal sort of cash reserves. That's pretty much it. That's as much as I know.
What do you know about where the royal family gets its money?
Well, I know it comes from the civil list, which is, as I understand it, allocated by Parliament. So ultimately it comes from people like myself, taxpayers.
I know that it's partly, a lot of it's a taxpayer. It's partly, some of it is their own private wealth. But yeah, a lot of it is via the taxman, via us basically.
I haven't got too much information on that, but I think that it comes out of taxpayers' money, as far as I'm aware.
How much do you think the royal family costs the taxpayers every year?
I've got no idea. Absolutely none.
Enough. I don't know exactly how much, but knowing that it's coming out of my wage every week and it's getting higher and higher, it's not very good, considering we're still in this climate at the moment.
How much do you think the royal family actually costs the British taxpayer?
Copious amounts of money. I mean, they've got like an abundance of properties, haven't they? And those properties have service charges, they're listed buildings, so maintenance needs to be done in a certain way, and that's not cheap.
I honestly don't know. I wouldn't know.
Different views there from the public here on the streets of London. Let's now find out what our experts have to say.
What's obvious is their money comes really from two sources, mainly perhaps from us, from ordinary British people, and also from the income from the investments that they've stacked up from previous theft from ourselves and across the globe. So that's where their money comes from, and that's a very important arena of political debate. The Queen gets a great deal of money from the British taxpayer, and for me, at a time of austerity, that's a particularly gross distortion of where our money should be going. We're told on a daily basis that there isn't enough money for disabled people on benefits, for job creation, for vital services like health and education, and yet at the same time, the Queen and the rest of the royal family managed to rack up 180 million, 200 million pounds in all, a significant portion of which comes directly from the British taxpayer. And at a time when we're being told we have to cut back all the time, that seems to me extraordinary, that those people get that money with really no accountability or democratic control at all. There's also money, of course, that comes from previous looting and theft from ourselves, the great landed estates, the royal family, and of the plunder of empire. But that also is something which we should look at very carefully. That money should be used for the good of the people in Britain and the good of people across the world, I believe.
There's a thing called the civil list, which is the kind of the money voted to them by Parliament to support the Queen and various of her relatives in their public duties. There are also various other expenses that come out of public money associated with their public duties, which aren't necessarily as clearly visible in public accounts. And then, of course, there's the question of what's regarded as being their own personal wealth. Now, obviously, you could argue that what they're doing with their personal wealth is their own business, as it is for anyone else. But there are certain issues which some people might raise about that. One being, how did they acquire this personal wealth in the first place? You might well argue that somewhere along the line it came from somewhere, and that somewhere it came from was perhaps the British public at some point in the past. So it does raise the question about how they came into this personal wealth. There's also the sticky issue of taxation. If it's personal wealth, you'd expect someone who was resident in the UK for tax purposes, which you'd like to imagine that the head of state of the United Kingdom was regarded as being a resident of the UK, although admittedly she's the head of state of a number of other countries as well. But you'd like to imagine that that person might be expected to pay regular tax on what is after all their personal income, but they don't. They don't have a normal tax arrangement. They have paid tax, but it's not done in the standard way. And we just don't really know what exactly their personal wealth is, and it's clouded to a large extent. We're expecting her to do things and fulfil a role. Whether or not you think that role should be fulfilled by an hereditary, unelected monarch is another issue. But while she and her various relatives are performing roles associated with this public role, it seems justifiable that there should be public money provided for that role. And if we had, say, a president instead of a monarch, certainly that president equally would be provided with public money to do that job. So that seems to me fair enough. Whether you need so many extended members of the family to be on the public payroll is another question. Whether they need as many palaces as they've got is another question. There are different ways of doing it, and you could still have a monarchy, but one that was cut down in terms of the numbers of people involved in the actual activities. That would be quite possible. You could also have more scrutiny of what's going on. So I think those are issues that certainly there's scope for debate about. But while we have a monarch as head of state, she or he in the future can reasonably expect the public duties that are being performed to be subsidised by the public. that seems inescapable.
The Queen's private wealth is estimated at over £300 million. Her son Charles receives tens of millions of pounds each year in income from his private estate. So, should they be receiving another £200 million a year from the taxpayer on top of all the wealth that they inherited? What's more, they are exempt from the Freedom of Information Act, and the public isn't told how their tax money is being spent. So, should the monarchy be more transparent?
I'm guessing like we should give them some money, but not 200 million to the royal family, where I'm not too sure what they do for this type of money. But yeah, I don't think they should do that. Get that amount of money.
Officially, the figure's between 30 and 40 million, but unofficially, it's about £200 million a year. Does that surprise you?
It sounds a lot of money, but then on the other hand, they are, I think they're good for the country. Not many countries have a royal family anymore, and they do a lot of work for charity, and they promote Britain.
Well, without that, I'm sure that they could fund themselves to some extent. You know, I know Buckingham Palace is open now, so and it seems an unwise use of money to spend that kind of volume on the royal family when it can go to hospitals, schools and anything else.
I think they need to, that 200 million, I think it needs to be opened to for us to have a look at. I think there could be a public debate on it because, you know, some of it, yes, you can justify. I think the security aspect of it that's justifiable, but sort of, do they need to travel in private planes? I think the Queen herself probably does. Do the rest of them? It's a debate.
Well, officially, the figure's around 30 or so million, but people say that really, when you add everything else, security and other things, it's about 200 million. Do you think the taxpayer should be paying that to support the royal family when now we're in a recession?
Recession or no recession, I can't see why the taxpayer would want to support a family that aren't really doing anything other than representing a country. You know, I think it's ridiculous that it's a responsibility of civilians to support a royal family or a monarchy when there are no real benefits to our nation.
200 million, and we're in this much trouble. Should be sorting out and paying 200 million something else, not. You know, we should be getting this country sorted, not towards a royal family and things like that.
Do you think, though, that the taxpayers should be supporting the Queen when she's a woman of means herself? She has private wealth of 300 million at least.
Yeah, I think given the job that she does, which is pretty thankless, let's be honest, you know, there can't be many people who would want to do that job.
No, I think that's a bad thing. I do think with the publicity and all the tourism, they could make money off that.
Considering that the Queen is probably one of the richest people on the planet, I think she could probably afford to dip into a few cash reserves and fund some of it herself.
Should the royal family be supported by taxpayers' money, in your view?
Absolutely not, definitely. You know, we would like to see some more public services.
No, I don't think any sane person would say that's right, to be honest with you. If she's worth that kind of money, she can pay her own way in the world.
Well, no, because they've got plenty of money themselves. They can go. I mean, you see them rolling around Aston Martins, Rolls Royces, things like that. You know, Rolls Royce costs 500,000 minimum. You know, it should be 500,000 can pay what? How many families?
Monarchy continues to be exempt from the Freedom of Information Act, so taxpayers don't really know what they spend their money on. You know, it could be lavish holidays or whatever. Do you think that should be changed?
Not really. I think security always comes into it. That's a very important issue. You know, we need them to have protection for all sorts of reasons. We live in a dangerous world, so it doesn't bother me at all.
I do have an implicit trust with our royal family, and as a national British person, you know, I trust that they're doing the right thing with taxpayers' money.
Absolutely. I think the British public has a right to know how they do spend their money. If the government's giving them 200 million a year, I think the public has a very big right to know how on earth they're spending it. Absolutely.
At the moment, they're exempt from the Freedom of Information Act, which means that we don't know how they spend much of the taxpayers' money. Do you think that's a problem?
I think perhaps they should be a bit more open about if it's taxpayers' money, then I think we should know.
Some of it yes, some of it no. I think there's a recent article about, for example, the security features they're going to be put in on Prince William and Kate's apartment. I don't agree with that. I think that's something that's private. I think that can only endanger them. But other things, yes, I think, there's always, if they've got nothing to hide, then they shouldn't have a problem with showing us where money's being spent.
Well, those are the views of the public. Let's now find out what our experts have to say.
For me, one of the crucial questions about the royal family is not simply economic, it's not just about the money they receive, it's a political question. They are put forward as a unifying factor. We're all Britons together, rich or poor, fortunate or unfortunate, the boss or the worker, we are all Britons and should unite under the royal family. And that's a very powerful message. All nationalisms based upon the idea that we should sacrifice ourselves at the altar of the great British nation, which is not a great nation except in plunder and in war. So let's be clear, it plays an important unifying political role for our rulers in society. That for me is very, very important. It encourages the idea of deference. There are some people that are greater than us, to whom we must look up and to whom we should bear allegiance. And that's much, much weaker in British society now. Even when I was born in the 1950s, the idea that there are some people that you have to doff your cap to and that you should constantly think are better than you is a much, much weaker one in society. But the royal family embodies it. And it's that idea which is, I think, very important about them. And for our rulers, that's why they like the royal family. They like the idea of people who act in that way as a unifying force, and to make us think that it's not a society divided by classes, it's simply one society where we're all the same. I don't believe it would have in any way a major impact upon tourism or any other form of income generation. But even if it did, I'd still be for it. And let's be clear, Britain has a history of this. We should remember that on the 30th of January 1649, the resurgent forces of Parliament lopped the head of King Charles I in Britain. There was a movement of Republicans, people who wanted democracy. They didn't want to be ruled over by a royal family. Regrettably, they managed to weasel their way back into that position.
There are various arguments for and against the economic benefits of the monarchy. I accept there are arguments in favour of the idea that there are economic benefits. That's certainly the case. There's also arguments that they can actually cause problems for the economy. Not necessarily the direct cost to the taxpayer, which isn't immense. That's more of a principal issue. But the issue of the impact that extra bank holidays has on the economy. There was some evidence that the royal wedding last year caused more damage to the economy than the rioting that took place last year. The benefits that are often advanced in favour of having a royal family, one, that it provides stability, it provides a kind of focal point for the country, which is actually above party politics. Particularly in the UK, where we don't have a written constitution to actually focus on as being the binding together entity in the state and in the nation, it's regarded as useful to having a monarchy, which is a sign of permanency. When governments come and go, the monarchy's always there. And as I said, the important point being that it's above party politics. That's the idea. Sometimes monarchs have got involved in party politics and that's become a problem. But generally, the principle is they don't get involved in party politics. If we didn't have a monarchy, we would probably have to have some kind of president who would actually be a politician. And so that could arguably create problems, because you would then have a head of state who wasn't impartial. So that's an advantage of a monarchy, is that if you see it as a good thing that the head of state and the symbol of the nation isn't a party politician, well, that's one of the ways of avoiding that happening, is by having a monarchy. There's certainly no reason to suppose that we couldn't cope without a monarchy. Whether we want to get rid of it is another issue, but there are plenty of countries around the world that used to be monarchies that aren't monarchies any longer, and there aren't that many cases of them going back to becoming monarchies after having got rid of them. So generally, countries which become republics carry on being republics. Not in every case, but that's what tends to happen. And many successful countries, Germany, France, the US, are all republics. It doesn't seem to be a terrible problem for them.
So what are the benefits of having a royal family? And do people think the UK would be better off with or without a queen, a king, and all those princes and princesses? Well, let's find out what the public thinks.
They're quite unique in terms of in the world at the moment. There's not many countries that have a royal family, certainly not one that has one that is such as popular as ours, especially with, you know, Will and Kate. So, I mean, and that encourages people to come and visit us for starters, and also gives us a point of difference within the world.
I think probably the biggest one is the tourist thing. I know that brings in an awful lot of money to the country. I'm actually for the royal family myself.
What do you think are the benefits of having a royal family?
There aren't any benefits of having a royal family whatsoever. There really aren't, you know. I can't see any. I'm struggling to think of one. Public holidays. Yeah, that'd be about it, you know. When there's a royal wedding or whatever, we get a couple of extra days off, don't we?
Well, I think it's great for the country and its presentation to the rest of the world. I think it's important that we're perceived in, you know, the correct light, and I think that the royal family do aid towards that. And I think that there's a huge, expansive, vast history of Britain that's incorporated in the royal family. So that's the important part of it.
Well, as I say, I mean, aside from the way that they're funded, you know, they've already touched on the tourism issue, and they bring people in.
So tell me, what are the benefits for Britain then in having a royal family?
I think they act as a figurehead. I think they show what's good about the country. I think they uphold values. And I think they are very good at promoting Britain in other countries around the world.
I don't know. I don't know any benefits. I thought about that the other day. Really, I don't think there's any.
It's just an attraction to the country, isn't it? Makes the country look a bit better, but I mean, nothing else really.
Do you think the UK would be better off with or without a royal family?
It's hard to say. I don't know that having a royal family makes a massive difference to me, whether we have one or whether we don't.
When I was younger, I didn't think much of them, but as I've grown older, not that I'm really old, but I mean, as I'm getting older, I have become to appreciate them much more, and I think that there is a role for them to play.
I think, to be fair, I think the Queen does an awful lot of good, and I think she's probably had one of the most difficult reigns. I know she's had nearly one of the longest. I think definitely the royal family should stay, but as I said, they should be accountable.
Do you think the UK would be better off with or without a royal family?
With or without? I think personally with, but I'm quite sure that if we had some other form, then it would be okay as well. But because I've grown up with the royal family, I suppose I support them for that reason.
If we could start from scratch, they're worth the money that they're worth, and they're funding themselves, then I'm not against them being there. But diverting public funds that can be spent on better causes, then I'm not really one for that, I'd say.
Doesn't really faze me. Obviously, it's great attracting people in with the royal family, but them having that much money, it's not beneficial at all to me. Not beneficial.
Okay, that's all we've got time for this week. Thank you so much for joining us. If you've got something to say yourself, send an email to asimplequestion@presstv.com. That's asimplequestion@presstv.com. Meanwhile, I'll see you next week. Bye-bye.